The next morning Emilia awoke to a feeling of someone holding her breasts. Opening her eyes, she raised her hand to smack whoever was groping her before she realized that it was Mashiro that was holding onto her chest. Glancing to her side, she saw that Mafuayu and Mashimo were hugging her arms in a death grip to themselves. Sighing softly to herself, she decided to let them sleep more and leaned back onto the bed and kissed the top of the three's heads, who upon receiving this sign of affection snuggled further into her arms and chest respectively. After letting them rest for an extra hour, she regrettably had to get up, which meant waking up the three sleeping girls. After being gently nudged awake by their aunt, the three children yawned quietly before looking up at Emilia, who was looking down at them with a smile on her face. Kissing them all on the forehead, Emilia said to them, "Good morning, my dears. Did you have a good sleep last night?" "Yes, auntie," they all said back with a cute expression on their face. Then once they realized what was happening that day, they all started to tear up as they remembered that their aunt was leaving that day. "Do you have to go, auntie? Can't you stay here with us?" they all cried with tears glistening in their eyes. Pulling them all into a hug with their heads buried in her chest, Emilia said, There, it'll be okay," Emilia said as she rubbed the back of their heads in comfort as they slowly made her nightshirt wet from all of their tears. As their tears ceased, the three girls stayed in their aunt's comforting embrace as she continued to rub their back despite the fact that they were burying their faces in the large wet patch that they had created on the front of Emilia's nightshirt. Pulling out of the embrace, two of the three girls rubbed their eyes to clear their eyes from any excess tears and looked up at their aunt and said, "Okay, auntie, we're fine now." However, the third sister, Mashiro, said nothing but still looked upset. Noticing the look on her face, Emilia asked, "Mashiro darling, what's wrong?" "It's nothing," Mashiro said in response. Gently hugging Mashiro to her chest, Emilia said, "Mashiro dear, I can't help you if you don't tell me what's wrong," Emilia said as she rubbed the top of her head. "It's just that," Mashiro said hesitantly before stopping. "What is it, my child?" Emilia said. "Do you promise to stay in contact every day when you're away?" Mashiro said worriedly. "I promise, my dear. I will contact you every night apart from if there is an emergency," Emilia said softly. "Okay, auntie," Mashiro said as her tears dried up. "That's better. You look much better without tears in your eyes," Emilia said kindly. "Girls, shall we get up for breakfast then?" Emilia said. "Okay, auntie," the three girls said as they got off the bed. "Alright girls, if you all go and get ready, I'll meet you downstairs for breakfast," Emilia said as she stood up from her bed and stretched her arms. "Okay," the three sisters said as they all rushed out of the door to their own rooms to get ready as quickly as they could. Laughing softly to herself at the sight of the sisters being excited, Emilia then sighed sadly and thought, "I'm afraid if something were to happen to me they wouldn't be able to cope. Especially Mashiro. If I had a child of my own it would be even worse, as they would be extremely jealous. However, all I can do is help prepare them in case the worst were to happen," Emilia thought as she walked out of her room to the bathroom to get ready. Once she stripped herself of her nightwear, she stepped into the shower. After she had a shower, Emilia went back to her room as her wet hair dripped onto her bare shoulders and the towel that was keeping her dignity intact. Changing into her admiral's uniform, Emilia walked down the stairs to be greeted by the Munetani family sitting at their dinner table. Upon noticing Emilia walking through the doorway, the three girls said, "Auntie, you're down. You look very smart, Emilia," Miyuki said as she admired her in her uniform. "Yeah," Miyuki's husband said with a slightly perverted look. "Dear, what are you looking at?" Miyuki asked as she glared at her husband and painfully gripped his arm under the table as punishment for his perverted look without anyone noticing her doing it. "Nothing, dear," he said as he flinched from the sudden pain being inflicted on him. "Excellent. Well then, shall we have breakfast then?" Miyuki said with a kind smile on her face disguising the malicious intent at her husband. "Okay," their three children said as they went back to their seats. Leaving a space in between her and her sisters, Mashiro said, "Auntie, come sit over here," Mashiro said as she patted the seat next to her. Okay, I'm coming," Emilia said as she sat down on the chair. Halfway through having their breakfast, Emilia said, "Remember girls, you still have a school day today." Or do we have to? The three girls whined. Yes you do, I'm afraid, Emilia said. But don't worry, your school is probably going to have a school trip to the docks today to see me and my ship off. Really? They asked in excitement. Yes, really, and I will be having a crew on board for their training onto battleships, Emilia said. Okay. Can you take us to school today? Mashimo asked while staring up at her aunt with puppy eyes. Yes I can, but I'll have to drop you off and then leave to be on time for the crew briefing, Emilia said, giving into the puppy eyes. Yes, the girls cheered in excitement. Now children, before we get to that, you still have your breakfast to finish, Mayuki said, reminding her children of why they were at the table in the first place. Okay, they said as they began eating again. After breakfast was over, Mayuki said to her children, girls, you should go and get ready or you'll be late for school. In response, the three girls ran up the stairs to their rooms to get ready. Turning to Emilia, Mayuki said, well Emilia, we're going to miss you. Keep yourself safe and come back home quickly, Mayuki said as she gave Emilia a hug. Once Mayuki released Emilia from the hug, Emilia was then brought into another hug by Mr. Munetani, who quickly let her go so his wife would not accuse him of being perverted. When the three girls came back, Emilia turned to them and said, well girls, we should get going now or you'll be late. Coming auntie, they replied as they followed her out to the family car. Turning to the only male there, Emilia said, do you think you could take me to the docks again today after we drop the children off at school? Yeah sure, he said as he got into the driver's seat. Thank you, Emilia said as she sat in the front passenger seat. Turning back to Mayuki, Emilia said, Mayuki, promise me that you'll take care of yourself and the others while I'm away. I promise, Mayuki said as she gave Emilia one last hug through the car window with tears in her eyes. Goodbye Mayuki, I'll see you at the departure and then in a couple of months at my return, Emilia said as she came out of the hug. Bye mummy, the three girls said from the back seat of the car. Bye dears, have a good day at school, Mayuki said as she waved goodbye to them as the car drove away. Bye, the passengers said as they waved back. After a 10-minute car journey, they arrived at the school. Getting out of the car, the three girls stood in front of Emilia as the other parents and their children watched on in shock at the woman in the naval officer's uniform. Who's that? One of the parents asked to the person standing next to them. Are you stupid? That's Admiral Emilia Schneider, the captain of the H-44, the one that's departing today. But what is she doing here? The person replied. Who knows, but she sure is hot, one of the fathers said as he stared at Emilia's large chest in her form-fitting uniform. Shh, don't say that, so you know how much trouble you could get in. Apparently the last person who did something perverted to her ended up hospitalized for 5 months, a mother said as the man who said this paled considerably, as did any other males who were in the gathered crowd. The man quickly hid himself into said crowd so Emilia wouldn't be able to find him. Meanwhile, with the three Munetani sisters. Bye auntie, we'll miss you, the three girls said as they began to tear up as they gave Emilia one last hug. We'll look out for you during your departure, they cried as Emilia hugged them back. I'll miss you too, and I'll also be looking out for you as well when I leave, Emilia said as she gave them one last hug before standing up to leave. Now girls, you should get to your classes or you'll be late, Emilia said. Okay auntie, we love you, they said as they began to make their way to their classrooms. Before they left hearing range, they heard Emilia say, I love you girls too. Turning around, the girls waved to their aunt one last time before they went into the school. Sighing, Emilia turned around and made her way back to the waiting car that would take her to the docks. Let's go, she said as she got in the car, ignoring the watching parents who were whispering to themselves. Okay, Mr. Munetani said as he put the car in gear and drove off towards the docks. When they got to the entrance of the dockyard, Emilia gave Mr. Munetani a final hug which he returned before she got out of the car and walked to the guard stationed at the gate while firmly placing her hat on her head. Getting to the gate, the guard came up to her and saluted and said, Admiral, it's good to see you. Your new crew are formed up waiting for you at the base of the gangway to your ship, the guard said. Returning the salute, Emilia said, Thank you Sergeant. Return to your duties if there is nothing else you can tell me. Emilia said. Oh, there is one more thing. The nearby schools are going to come to see you off. The guard said. I see. Thank you for telling me. Emilia said as she went to leave. Giving a salute, the sergeant said. Good luck on your journey, Admiral, and take care. Thank you. Take care of yourself too, Sergeant, Emilia said as she returned the salute before walking to the docks. Arriving at the dock, Emilia was greeted by 40 men and women in naval uniform formed up in front of her. Clearing her throat and walking to a position where everyone could hear her, Emilia said, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those that don't know me, I am Admiral Emilia Schneider and I will be your commanding officer for this journey. Good morning, Admiral. 40 voices chorused back to her. Now then, this ship is going to be your home for the next few months or even longer if any of you are staying on board. So I want this ship to be treated like you would with your own homes. This ensures that it is always combat ready, as we never know what we may face. What I don't want, however, is any bullying, discrimination of any kind, or insubordination between ranks. If there is, the people involved will be severely punished, and if it's bad enough, then they will be discharged from the Blue Mermaids when we return. What I also don't want is any indecent behavior happening on board that will affect the handling of the ship, even though there will be males and females living in close proximity to each other. Always remember, nothing happens on this ship without me hearing about it. Because if you have done any of thing I've told you about, then I will know about it and you will be punished according to how severe the case may be. Is that understood? Yes, Admiral, the crew said. Excellent. Now then, we have an hour and a half to get this ship ready to sail. Before we depart, we will be given a goodbye from all the neighboring schools and colleges where they'll be given a chance to ask questions about yourselves. Please do not be afraid to try to inspire the students to become members of the Blue Mermaids. Okay, good. When you go on deck, there is a map on the wall in front of you. Take a picture of it with your phones. This will be the only time I'll let you use your phones when you're on duty. If you're not on duty, then you are free to use them as long it doesn't disrupt the running of this ship, Emilia said. Glancing at her watch, she said, Once you are fallen out, I will give you an hour to find your rooms and get acquainted with where you will be waiting. Then you'll gather here again to talk to the visiting students before we depart. Now I know you're all wondering what we'll be doing while we're at sea. Well, what we will be doing is patrolling and protecting the convoy routes from any possible attacks. Is that understood? Yes, Admiral, the crew replied back to her. Good. Lieutenant, if you may dismiss them to their duties, please, Emilia said, turning to the lieutenant at the front of the flight of people. Yes, Admiral, she said in response as she marched out of the flight and saluted to Emilia before turning to the flight that she just left and saying, Flight Shun. An officer on parade. Dismissed. The lieutenant said before she saluted again with the rest of the flight to Emilia and marched off with the rest of the flight as they made their way up the gangway to get ready for their departure. Meanwhile, with the three sisters sitting in class, the three sisters sat in their classrooms and waited for their teachers to arrive while thinking about their aunt. When the teacher arrived, the class became quiet and the teacher said, Settle down, class. Today is going to go a little differently than normal, as this school is going to have a trip to see the departure of the H-44 battleship as it leaves port. While we're there, we will be allowed to talk to the crew before they leave. So if you have any questions, please make sure to ask them. When the teacher said this, the students immediately became excited as they said, Oh my God, I hope that I can talk to Admiral Emilia. She's my hero. One girl said, Well, I'm going to ask her out. Imagine having her as your girlfriend. One of the older boys in Mashimo's class said, How, you have no chance. She'd never go for a 10-year-old like you. The boy's friend said to him, You're just saying that because you know she's never go for you. The boy said in reply. Mashimo chose not to say anything as it would put her in an awkward position, one which she would rather avoid. Getting on the buses as the whole school got ready to leave, the Munetani sisters sat together and tried to ignore the excited chatter that had continued from when it started in the classroom. I can't wait to see Auntie again, Mashiro said to her sisters, who only nodded in agreement despite it being only an hour before they last saw her. Arriving at the gates, the driver stopped and one of the accompanying teachers got off to allow them entry to the docks. Walking up to the same guard that had greeted Amelia, the teacher said, "Hi there, we're from the Junior Naval Academy to see the departure of the H-44. Okay. Can I see your paperwork please?" the guard said. "Okay, here you go," the teacher said as she handed all of the required papers to the guard. "Okay. Everything seems to be in order. To get to the dock, just follow the cones which will take you to an area to park your coaches. When you get there, there will be personnel to guide you to your designated position," the guard said as he handed the paperwork back to the teacher. "Okay, thanks for your help," the teacher said as she got back on the bus. As the bus entered the gate, all the children looked around in the hope that they would be able to see the famous battleship first. Unknown to them, however, that 3 of their classmates had already seen it up close and had even had a guided tour. If they would probably be overcome by jealousy. "Look, there it is," one of the girls said as the superstructure of the H-44 came into view. All the passengers of the coach stared in awe at the large warship apart from the Munetani sisters. Getting off the bus, the teacher said, "All right students, I want you all on your best behavior. You're representing the school in front of the admiral, who in the future will probably be your most senior officer. So if you do something that will embarrass yourself now, then she'll more than likely remember it in the future. So I want no messing around. Okay?" "Yes, ma'am," the students apart from the previous male said. He just gave a perverted grin at thought of doing things to Amelia. As this was happening, a Marine walked over to the teacher and said, "Are you here for the departure?" "Yes, we are," the teacher said. "Okay, you're one of the first ones here, so you're near if not at the front. Everyone please follow me, and when we get there, stay in your designated area until you're allowed to mingle around. And lads, you might not want to think, say or do anything perverted when you're around the admiral, as the last person who did was hospitalized for 5 months and left traumatized," the Marine said. All the boys paled, especially the one who was originally thinking perverted thoughts now shivered in fear as to what could happen to him if he was caught. "However, she is more lenient on children, so she won't hurt you if do something. She'll just scare you a bit," the Marine said to help calm the terrified boys down. However, this caused the perverted boy's grin to return as he believed that he didn't have anything to fear. FYI, this kid is probably as perverted as a certain Red Dragon Emperor. Following after the Marine, they all walked to their area where they saw the crew doing drill exercises on the dock in front of them. With Amelia. "Lieutenant, is everything ready for departure?" Amelia asked the lieutenant next to her. "Yes, ma'am, the ship is prepared and ready to go," the lieutenant said. "Good. Are all of the schools that are coming here yet?" "Almost. The last ones have just passed through the main gate," the lieutenant said. "Very well, then when they get here we will start," Amelia said. "Yes, ma'am," the lieutenant said. 10 minutes later, once everyone was gathered in front of her, Amelia went up to her readily prepared podium and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to see us off on our voyage. It warms my heart to see so many young souls excited to become our nation's next line of defense. After I finish talking, we will give you a chance to speak to our crew about their experiences in the Blue Mermaids and other armed forces. So without further ado, you may all mingle with the crew for 20 minutes before we leave," Amelia said as she stepped down from the podium. Once she said that, the Marines allowed all of the children to go and talk to the crew. Almost immediately, the Munetani sisters ran to their aunt, who was gradually being surrounded by a swarm of children. Hugging Amelia's waist, the sisters said, "Hi auntie, did you miss us?" Upon hearing what they said, the other children said in shock, "What? She's your aunt?" While kneeling down to give her nieces a return hug, Amelia said, "Yes, these 3 dears are my nieces." When she said this, their classmates said, "Hey Mashimo Mafuayu Mashiro, why didn't you tell us that you're related to Admiral Amelia?" they said jealously. Mashimo said, "That's because we didn't want to deal with how you'd react like now. We also didn't want you to treat us any differently." "Well said, my dear," Amelia said proudly. "Well, that still doesn't excuse the fact that you had a hot aunt and you never told us," the perverted boy said as he stared at her pronounced chest. "What are you doing? We were warned not to do anything perverted unless we want to get into trouble," The boy's friend said in a panicked tone. Oh, she's not going to do anything. Remember what that guy said, that she's kind to children, so we don't have anything to worry about, and besides we can just blackmail her into getting what we want. The perverted boy said without noticing a large shadow falling over him. Oh, and how would you do that? Dude, shut up, his friend said. Ignoring his friend, the massive pervert continued with his monologue. Well, what we'd do is tell her that we'd hurt her nieces if she didn't do what we wanted. Then we'd force her to take our virginities. Then we'd fuck her so much that she'd be our personal slut, and then we'd impregnate her, then leave her for someone else. I can't wait to get a piece of her, he said without feeling the air become tense from the anger Emilia was releasing at him. Cracking her knuckles, Emilia said threateningly. Oh really? Feeling someone behind him, he turned around to confront whoever it was that had disturbed him from his thoughts when he came face to face with a certain admiral who had a sadistic grin on her face. The boy shivered in fear when he saw her glowing red eyes and the grin on her face. Grinning violently, Emilia said, "Oh please, don't mind me. Please continue. I just happened to overhear what you do to my nieces and me." "Care to repeat them?" she said as she glared down at him. No, Mom. It was nothing, I didn't say anything," he said nervously as a wet patch appeared on his trousers. "Oh dear, it appears that you've wet yourself. I'm sure you wouldn't want anyone to know about it," Emilia whispered in his ear maliciously. What do you want from me?" he said, almost crying. "Oh, I just want you to stay well away from me or my nieces, or I might have to let everyone know about your little accident," Emilia said in a mocking tone. "Yes, Mom. I promise I'll do what you say," the boy said while in tears. "Very good," Emilia said before turning to the gathered crowd of children watching the scene play out. The Munetani sisters glared fiercely at the boy who tried to hide himself in the crowd and leave. "Now that's over with. Does anyone have any questions?" Emilia said with a kind smile returning back on her face. "Oh, I have one," one of the girls said. "What's it like being in control of such a large ship?" "Oh, that's a good one. Well, it's very exhilarating, especially when in battle. It's also a good feeling when you see the gratitude on crews of ships that you have rescued or protected from enemy attackers. It is one of the best feelings you can have. It's also a good morale boost as the crew will feel better as it feels like they've actually done something to help save someone," Emilia said. This continued for several minutes where Emilia answered everything that she could before she said, "I'm afraid we'll have to wrap things up here, as we are set to depart soon." The children just said, "Oh," in disappointment. "Bye everyone," Emilia said as she began to walk away. "Bye Auntie Mashiro," Mafuayu and Mashimo said as they gave her another hug. "Bye my dears. Look after your parents and each other for me." "Okay," Emilia said as she gave a kiss on each of their foreheads. "We will, Auntie. Remember our promise," they said as they released her from their grip. "Of course. I'll see you soon," Emilia said as she walked away. Walking up to the nearby lieutenant, Emilia said, "Lieutenant, get the crew on board as we are leaving soon." "Yes, Mom. I'll make sure that they are on board before it's time for us to leave," the lieutenant said as she saluted Emilia. "Good. I'll be on the bridge if you need me." "Yes, Mom," the lieutenant said as she stood in front of the crowd and said over everyone, "All crew of the H-44 prepare to board. We'll be leaving in a few minutes." Once she said this, all the service personnel regretfully left their families and made their way up the gangway, the bow of the vessel. Once everyone was on board, they did a final roll call before they got into position at the dock side of the ship for the departure. When they were all ready, Emilia said to the radio operator, "Get the tugboats to pull us away from the dock. Then we'll head off on our own power." "Yes, Mom," she replied as she communicated with the tugs to start pulling them away from the dock. With the watching crowd, as the ship began to pull away from the dock, the crowd began cheering and waving to the passing crew as they left. Looking up and down the ship while trying to spot her aunt, Mashiro turned to her sisters and said, "Can you see Auntie? I can't find her." "No, not yet, but I'm sure we'll see her before they leave," Mashimo said comfortingly to her youngest sibling. The minute she said this, Emilia came out of the bridge and leaned against the railing of the bridge wing and waved down at the crowd as they passed by below her. Spotting their aunt, the three sisters called out and said, "Bye auntie, we love you." They screamed in the hope that she would hear them. Luckily for them she did and responded back by saying, "I love you too my dears." Emilia said back to them as she blew a kiss to them, which they reached up and caught before placing their hands over their hearts. The crowd continued to wave and cheer until the battleship faded over the horizon. Once it left, the crowd was escorted back to the buses, where they then went back to school to continue with their lessons.